Hi guys, welcome back. I'm Mai with Simply Bloom. So today I want to go through a list of plants, perennials specifically, that are great for shade or dappled shade that are not hostas. And as beautiful as hostas are, I have several in my garden already. They are the first things that the deer eat. The only things in my shade bed that the deer eat. So maybe if you don't have any hostas, and the deer might eat other things, but my hostas are the first and the only things that the deer eat in my shade garden. So I thought, you know what, why don't I come up with a list of other great perennials that are beautiful, so beautiful, that the deer tend to stay away from. So these are in no particular order. Number 1's not my favorite. Number 10 is not my least favorite. I love them all. This just happened to be the order as I thought of them and the order that I wrote them down on my handy dandy little notebook. So beginning with Brunnera or Brunneria, depending on what region you live in. I'm obsessed with this plant. There's tons of different varieties. The ones that I have in my garden are the Queen of Hearts, Brunnera. Now what I love about these is their leaf is so striking. It almost looks like a dragon scale to me, or some sort of thing like that. Has beautiful silvery texture on the leaf. They get these beautiful little blue flowers in the early spring. I know not everyone likes the way they look. They're little bloom stalk flowers. I personally love the way their flowers look. And then after their blooms die back, you're left with those beautiful, striking, silvery leaves. Now, they come in a wide variety of sizes depending on what variety, but the Queen of Hearts that I have gets 16 to 18 inches tall, 28 to 36 inches wide. So it gets like a big, broad leaf. Similar to the big broad leaves of hostas, but I haven't had any deer eat these. Now, when I first bought the Queen of Hearts, I'm 110% sure that it said zones 4 through 8. When I just looked it up for this video under proven winners, it actually said zone 3 through 8, and it does survive well in my zone 3 garden, northern Minnesota. Moving on, Lungwort. Just like Brunnera, there's so many different varieties of Lungwort. The ones that I personally have in my garden, speaking from personal experience, is the Pretty in Pink. Now, Lungwort's known for more of a slightly like delicate, slender leaf. It has beautiful silvery blue spotting on the leaves. The leaf structure or texture, at least in my Lungwort, is almost like a velvety texture leaf, a little bit more rough, velvety texture. Best way I can describe it. And then the Pretty in Pink Lungwort that I have has these beautiful pink flowers with just a little hint of blue. There's some varieties that have more blue flowers. This one's more on the pink side with a little hint of blue. Zones 3 through 9, 14 to 16 inches tall, 24 to 28 inches wide. Next is Ligularia. There's several different varieties of Ligularia. I have 3 varieties in my garden. One variety that I have is the Little Rocket variety. I love this. It has more of a pointy leaf. A lot of times when I think of Ligularia, it has more like a rounded leaf. I like them because they remind me of lily pads, but this Little Rocket has more of a pointy leaf. The stem itself is like a deep purple, almost black stem, and it has these tall yellow flower spikes. Zones 2 through 9, very cold hardy, 23 to 35 inches tall, 23 to 29 inch spacing. The other variety of Ligularia I have is Desdemona. I love this variety. Like I said, a massive lily pad like foliage. The new leaves that emerge are a kind of like a purple / bronze color, and then as the leaves age, they turn to a deep green. But the undersides of the leaves remain a purple. And then they do get yellow flowers as well. They're not the spike flowers, they're just little, almost like daisy-like yellow flowers. 3 to 4 feet tall, 2 to 3 feet wide, zones 4 through 9, but should overwinter fine. I planted it last summer, so it hasn't gone through winter yet, but I think it will be fine. Heuchera. Heuchera is a great foliage plant. They do get little itty bitty flowers, very airy, wispy flowers that I love to use in flower arrangements. They just add like a little bit of a sparkle, a little bit of interest in arrangements, but they're known more for their foliage, and they come in every single color you can imagine. Greens, reds, yellows, purples, almost like a deep black. So beautiful and great for a shade. Some of the newer varieties can take sun as well, but two of my favorite Heuchera varieties that I've grown that do come back really well for me every year. I know some of the older varieties don't quite come back real strong. These have came back very strong for me. First one is a wild berry Heuchera. It has this beautiful deep, almost like beautiful deep purple foliage, 10 to 14 inches tall, 16 to 20 inches spacing. And then the other one that I love is wild rose, a little bit more of a red undertone rather than purple, 8 to 10 inches tall, 18 to 20 inches wide. And I believe all Heuchera are zones 4 through 9. Next, Astilbes. I love Astilbes. Keep in mind they do like to stay fairly moist. If they dry out at all, they get kind of crispy brown edge leaves. But my favorite variety that I have is the Visions Astilbe. It's this beautiful, like raspberry red, almost purple magenta bloom. So beautiful. And then after the blooms fade, they actually dry really, really pretty as well. And I've used both fresh and dried blooms in flower arrangements. This one particularly is zones 4 through 9, 14 inches tall, 12 inches wide. And there is another variety of Astilbe that I want to love so much. It's called Dark Side of the Moon. Proven Winners came out with it. I want to love it so much. It has beautiful deep foliage, a pale pink bloom. It can take sun or shade, and I have it planted in both spots, sun or shade, in my garden. It's not a top performer. I keep trying. Maybe I need to give it a little bit more water. But that's an option too. But like I said, the Visions Astilbe just outperforms it so much more. But I want to love the Dark Side of the Moon because it is so gorgeous. We just haven't figured it out yet. Next, Snake Root, and Chocoholic is one of my varieties that I have. I have two varieties. Both varieties have a deep burgundy foliage. This one has tall white flower spikes, zones 4 through 8, 4 to 5 feet tall, so definitely tall. The leaves themselves don't get that tall. I want to say the leaf structure tops out at about 3 feet, but then the bloom spike gets up to the 6 foot mark. 15 to 18 inches wide, so definitely more of a narrow thing that's super easy to tuck into smaller spaces, and it just adds that vertical height. The other variety that I have is Pink Spike. Very similar dark foliage, but the flower is more of a pink color than a white. The pink one can handle all different lights, so it can handle full shade, partial shade, and full sun. And I have two. I have one planted in full sun, one planted in full shade. I planted those last summer, so I'm really curious to see how the different light requirements or the different lighting will affect how it grows. But the Pink Spike gets 48 to 52 inches tall and 24 inches wide. Next, Woodland Phlox. A lot of people, when they hear phlox, they think of either the creeping phlox or the tall garden phlox. This is different. Still a phlox. It gets taller than the creeping phlox, but not as tall as the tall garden phlox. The variety that I have is Blue Moon. Zones 3 through 8, 12 to 24 inches tall, 24 to 36 inch spacing. It has really kind of like delicate leaf structure, almost ferny, not quite ferny, but very delicate leaves. It gets early bloom, so earlier than your typical phlox, and it gets these beautiful baby blue soft blooms. Absolutely gorgeous. And this one's good for a shade or dappled shade. Next, moving on to another blue blooming perennial, Jacob's Ladder. Now there's a couple of different varieties. As far as I was kind of doing some research, I found two. I believe the one that I have is the Heaven Sent Jacob Ladder, zones 3 through 7. Now they said when I was reading that if you're in cooler zones, then it can tolerate more full sun. This is another thing that I have planted in dappled shade and full sun. The ones in full sun is not performing as well. They're a little bit more smaller. They don't bloom quite as much. The ones that I have in almost full shade, it just gets a couple hours of sunlight in the late afternoon. That one is very prolific. Lots of blooms, taller plant, more robust looking. Keep in mind these self-seed very easily. So it is one that I have found has spread. It hasn't spread crazy. but it has self-seeded, which I really like. I really want it to self-seed, so I'm totally fine with that. The Heaven Sent variety gets 18 to 24 inches tall, 15 to 18 inches wide, and it has these really beautiful like blue clustered flowers, really airy, and the leaf itself on the plant is almost kind of like a ferny texture as well. Moving on to 2 ground covers. Now I know some people have mixed feelings on these ground covers, especially one, and that is Lamium. I personally love Lamium. I live in zone 3. I don't really find it to take over my garden, but I know some other people in warmer zones, it's been known to take over. But from what I can understand, it is a pretty easy plant to control. You just pull it up very easily. From what I understand, that's what I've heard. I've heard people say they just go in and kind of pull out what they don't want, and it's easy to maintain. I've never had a problem with it taking over. There's 2 varieties that I grow. A pink one from Proven Winners, Pink Chabis, I believe is how you say it. 8 to 12 inches tall, 14 to 24 inch spacing. So it does get a nice ground cover spacing. I like Lamium because it kind of has like a silvery color, light pale green silvery color leaf, and then it gets really pretty pink flowers. The other one that I grow is Purple Dragon. A little bit shorter, only 8 inches tall, but 18 to 24 inch spacing, and it gets beautiful purple flowers. Next one, Ajuga. Same thing. Ajuga kind of spreads by runners, kind of like strawberries. I personally love it, but it doesn't necessarily take over my garden either. The one that I love is Chocolate Chip Ajuga. It has this really pretty burgundy. When I was reading the description, it said chocolate, like a chocolate brown color leaves. I wouldn't necessarily say they were chocolate brown color leaves. They were more of like a deep olive burgundy color leaf, but it gets these really pretty blue spiky flowers in the early spring. 2 to 3 inches tall, so pretty short, 24 to 36 inches wide. Last one that I want to talk about is hardy geraniums. Now there's a ton of hardy geraniums that work great and more like the dappled shade, so part shade. I have lots of different hardy geraniums on my property. The dark reader, I have that one in full sunlight, so I can't really talk about how it will do in shade, but the dark reader has that dark purple foliage and it gets these really pretty purple flowers. There's another hardy geranium, Max Fry, has these really pretty deep green leaves with this really pretty pinkish, almost magenta purple blooms. That one is in dappled shade. 8 inches tall, 12 inches wide. I'm sure there are a lot of other great perennials for partial shade or full shade. I tried to choose ones that reached a large zone. Again, I'm in zone 3, northern Minnesota. All these work great for me, but most of these go up to at least zone 8 or 9. So if you're in a warmer zone, you could probably, hopefully, grow these with success in your garden as well. Let me know if there's any that you love that I did not mention in the list. I'd love to add more to my shade gardens, but that is it. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.